Good Sunday night. I am Thabo Julian. Thank you for joining us on In Focus tonight. What is the role of the media in our current state of polarization and the twisting of facts to suit a particular agenda? The Global Disinformation Index found that 41% of South Africans distrust the media, while 70% are concerned about distinguishing between truth and fake news. So we had invited a panel tonight to be with us, but one of the members of the panel, because of load shedding, unfortunately couldn't join us. But we still have with us Wits University Adjunct Professor of Journalism, Professor Anton Harber. Prof, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and for joining us tonight on In Focus. That is, in fact, the stats that we find also in the report that was put together by SANEF, that Global Disinformation Index finding that 41% of South Africans distrust the media. Why do you think there is such a growing, I mean, it's not huge, but it could get worse, and it certainly is growing by the day, distrust in the media? What are the contributing factors to the trust corrosion or erosion?
Good evening. Let me just clarify a point. The figures you quote are from a very recent Reuters global survey of trust in the media. And surprisingly, trust in South Africa went up from last year and did surprisingly well in comparison to much of the world. So it wasn't as bad as one might have expected, but we have a global problem in that there is a lack of trust in the media, and people are thrown into doubt by the level of disinformation, mainly from social media and the internet, and the increasing difficulty they have in differentiating between disinformation and real information.
Certainly in South Africa, I suppose in recent years, citizens' ability to access reliable political information is not completely eroded, but it is somewhat hindered. How does this impact on our democracy system?
Well, a democracy clearly depends on citizens being informed, having access to reliable information in order to participate in our democracy and keep faith in our democracy. And certainly, like newsrooms around the world, our newsrooms have been under pressure and they have shrunk, and our capacity to cover all the news is diminished. But I think that the quality of our coverage, I don't think one can generalize. I think, across the whole media, I think there are pockets where one gets really good, reliable coverage. But sadly, there are elements of our media that allow themselves to be used by one or other party or one other faction within a party in a way that lowers their credibility and the level of trust we can have in them.
Yeah. And Prof, when we especially look at, for example, the real impact of the media most recently in driving perception about COVID-19, did the media follow the political divide, or did media create the political divide? How powerful was the media really?
Look, the media is incredibly powerful and influential at a time like during the pandemic, where it's critical that people get good, solid, reliable information. There's no question. And again, I would be careful of generalizing across the media. There was some very good coverage, some very responsible coverage as a whole, but there were areas and pockets where people allowed themselves, I think, to carry some of the disinformation or not be quick to challenge it. But for example, challenging the government at every turn, on that we've been pretty good. We've been pretty solid. We do have a noisy, outspoken media that is able to speak out. Now, as I say, there are elements of the media which I think too easily allow themselves to fall prey to a factional politics and to disinformation. But there are also pockets that are really very good and very reliable.
Yeah. there are some within the space, and I gather, Prof, from hearing you, that that's also maybe your point of view as well, that media is diverse. You do not buy into this narrative of media this, media that, media this and media that, because our media is so diverse to the extent that you've got Twitter, you've got all sorts of media. But then the other argument is that as diverse as it is, it then contributes to the divide in society, because most consumers will follow the feed that matches their belief, and outlets then tend to want to benefit from that and therefore push a particular narrative.
Well, I think there's a great deal of responsibility on citizens, on the audience, on the consumers of media as well, to make sure they get a diversity of views. They don't just follow journalists and social media that they agree with, and that they read it all critically and actively learn how to differentiate between good journalism and disinformation. Because we know there are those who want to maliciously spread disinformation, to make money from it, or to score political points, or just to cause mischief. A good deal relies on citizens to follow the media and the journalists they believe are trustworthy, and to follow a range of diverse media so you're not getting narrow opinions, and to be critical and discerning in checking that what you're reading is not disinformation.
Yeah. And what options then do we have within that space of stopping this cycle, as you put it, of believing the lies and being able to distinguish between fake and true news? I mean, already fact checkers are working overtime at this particular point. So what are the other solutions to dial back? And is there motivation within the media space to dial back?
Look, the whole world is grappling with how to stop disinformation on social media. We have pretty good mechanisms in general in traditional media, structures of self-regulation that helps citizens work out what's reliable and trustworthy. The whole world, though, is struggling with the spread of disinformation on social media. And I think the root of it is that platforms like Facebook and Twitter have to take increasing responsibility to ensure they are not purveying dangerous disinformation. Having a diverse media, a media that debates and discusses and challenges each other and watches each other, is a healthy thing. It's healthy for democracy. So we must be careful not to undermine that and to value the extent to which we have that. I wish our media was much more diverse, but I wish that we could develop increasingly strong tools to differentiate between real journalism and disinformation.
Yeah. And how do we do that in an environment where outlets, for example, benefit from a particular narrative, right? So if a media is going to get ratings, or if a media is going to get sales by a particular choice of topic or by a particular choice of guest, are we saying we are now going to stop particular voices on our media platforms from giving them airtime because they make maybe statements that are outrageously biased to a particular individual or a particular agenda?
No, we don't want to silence voices unless they really are malicious and dangerous. We want a diversity of voices. We want strong public debate. But we do want citizens and the audience and the consumers to be more discerning in differentiating between truth and disinformation. And as I say, I think we need a great deal more media literacy. I think people need to learn the critical tools. I think we need to be teaching in schools, teaching people how to do their own fact-checking and verification, and to read the signs of disinformation. But I certainly don't think we want to silence voices unless they present imminent danger to our democracy.
Yeah. And then again, I mean, we are also heading towards an election of the ruling party and possibly an election as well in 2024 of the country. And there is a lot of commotion and noise that is out there at this particular point. Does media then, at this particular point, just take a backseat and follow the politics, or do we drive the politics?
No, I think media has special responsibilities in an election time. And it can't just report it like a horse race. This one's winning, this one's losing, this one's ahead, this one's behind, because that's very limited coverage. So I would emphasize 2 points. I think there's a special responsibility to be non-partisan in an election time for journalists and for our media to not take any political partisan positions, but to make sure their reporting is balanced, fair, and diverse. I think we must, the media should embrace certain values and certain ethics and certain beliefs, but on a political basis, it must be fiercely non-partisan, so that it can best serve its second function, which is to say to people, we're not going to cover this like a horse race, but we're going to try and provoke debate and discussion about the issues, the policies, the options you face. Because otherwise, the challenge is to ensure the election coverage isn't just surface coverage, but directs people to think about their options, the policy differences, the character, the personality differences, all the kind of information you need to make a really thoughtful, informed choice when you go to the polls.
Professor Anton Harber, appreciate your time, and thanks so much for coming on and for joining us tonight.